Okay, now we're recording. Yes. So what we're going to do, we've gone through those norms and logistics. A quick moment on why this session, why now. We just did the school board overview. We did our expectations. Well, we're kind of in the middle of that. So again, why this session, why now? Again, it is to primarily obtain feedback and perspective from this community about the head of school transition and the models we are evaluating. And as an executive committee, we will be making a recommendation to the board so that we can begin that. So let me jump back down now. We've mentioned these norms, the group norms, the pandemic norms. Does anyone have any other norms you'd like to add that might be important to this session today? If you do, please go ahead and use the raise hand feature. If you're good to go, please go ahead and either use your Zoom reactions, or I think we might have the little thumbs up option as well. Actually double checking. I'll just give a moment to everyone find them. You should be able to use reactions too, and you can give a thumbs up there too. And feel free to unmute as well if there's anything else you want to share.
Jenny, I'm not sure
I see the chat's lighting up.
Yeah. React.
So that's what I'm noticing. Yeah, okay. So the raise hand feature, you might see, I see it. Let's see, yeah, for some reason, it looks like reactions are on here, sorry. I thank you, Adam. I see no other norms to add. Feel free to put in chat as well. No, Nat, I don't think you're missing something. I think we're all missing it. Let's see. No reactions in webinar mode for panelists. Thank you, Abby. Okay, so that's why we don't have it. So feel free to use the chat if you have anything you want to make sure we add. I personally did find we do have the option. Oh, because we're all panelists now. That's why. Because you're all panelists, you don't have raise hand because you can just unmute. All right, that's why. I believe. So feel free to just speak up and unmute if you need. Otherwise, let's keep going. Okay. So I'm going to jump to another an actual PowerPoint on this screen with an overview of the head of school transition models. Take a few minutes to walk through what we've been evaluating to give a bit more context of what we're talking about. And did everyone see the slide just change to head of school transition models for consideration?
Yes.
Thank you. So this again is presented by your Great River School Executive Committee. So level set for a moment. How do we get here? About a year ago, I think, Sam O'Brien announced that this would be his final school year as head of school at Great River. Actually, technically last year. So in the fall, winter of 2019, which seems like 17 years ago, we did begin a search process and recruiting process. Now, winter/spring of 2020, the search was stopped for a number of reasons, particularly the exploding pandemic of COVID-19 and the inability to, for instance, interview people in person. So that made for some difficulties, a lot of ambiguity, a lot of flux, not sure what to do. So we agreed that we would go ahead and have Sam extend as head of school for school year 2021. At that time, in April, Sam did help assist, and we did come up with this outline of what would a new search look like once we're ready to roll again on that, including the ability, ideally, to meet in person, at least in small groups, in order to do panel interviews, things like that. So we are here at what I would call phase 0. But when we're ready to begin a brand new full search, we would want to take approximately 3 months for designing it, approximately 3 months for recruiting candidates, approximately 3 months to interview said candidates across the identified stakeholders, and then approximately 3 minutes to finalize with offers and hiring and the communication, et cetera. So really about a year process if in a perfect world if we're going to do this. And again, we are pre any of that at this time. Regardless of what happens next, we also identified there's some key workflows or channels that all need attention, we believe, for this to go successfully. And this is part of where we've been getting feedback on what happened last year, what were lessons learned from the process, that even though it was ended, there were lessons learned in the meantime. So we know, for instance, Now you see across the bottom, no matter what, we're going to need proactive, effective, and transparent communication. We also need really just a whole, and you could think of these as teams of people. We need people to focus on effective communication through the Great River community, faculty, staff, parents, uh, other stakeholders like the authorizers, bondholders, ABC, understanding where are we at? What is the search going to look like? What is the process? How are we designing it? What are the timelines? What do we know and what don't we know? What's the latest update, etc. There's also all these different sets of work that need to occur to be most effective. One is if we go with an interim head of school search, we need to have a different one group looking for an interim head of school and another group doing that longer 12-month, 3-month design process minimum for a permanent head of school. Those really shouldn't be the same groups of people because it's very different work. We should leverage expert resources to get this done as efficiently and as well as possible. We need to have very well-defined job descriptions and roles and responsibilities, both for an interim role, if we do that, as well as that long-term, what is the new head of school? What should that role look like? When it comes time to evaluating candidates, having standard protocols, how do we review and evaluate resumes, including scoring and weighted factors? So there is some arm's length objective criteria being used. And for interviews, establishing who are the teams, who's getting represented, having established questions. So the interviewees and the interviewers all have that level playing field and expectations of how the process will work and consistent. And then finally, is Great River prepared for the permanent head of school as the job description is designed? Do we have a gap analysis between being able to possibly evolve the role into what we believe Great River needs now? And what does that mean for, say, our program managers? And is there some work to be done for mentoring or leadership or responsibilities that need to evolve and change, looking ahead to what that job description is and who we're looking for? So all of this ideally is going to need to get done kind of in parallel in order for this to coalesce and be as good as it could be, I will say. So here's what we know. There are 3 basic models to consider. Model A, B, and C. Model A, hire an interim head of school to begin summer 2021. Sam could act as a part-time consultant as needed. And then the permanent head of school search commencing next fall, 2021, and taking place over the next school year, ideally meaning that we have a permanent head of school beginning in school year 2022. Model B would be keep doing what we're doing, continue the pandemic operations, leveraging our interim managing director, and then Sam still staying on in title as head of school, but transferring school operation finances in June to our managing director. We would commence the head of school search ideally in the fall, but at a currently undefined time. And then model C is begin right now, search for a permanent head of school, let's get going, and they begin next fall. So the executive committee has reviewed all 3 of these options, and we have come to the conclusion that neither model B or C is one we would recommend for a number of reasons. Model C, of course, we're already behind schedule. If we were to take that 3-month at a stage time, we would need to have started in last August. Model B, although it is working now, our concern is that it doesn't give that sense that we are actually moving forward and taking the need to bring in a new permanent head of school with as much priority as we should. Yes, it's crazy right now. The pandemic's making everything nuts. We also need to continue to look to the future. And by continuing in a half in, half out mode, our concern is that it will lead to feelings of ambiguity. So we are recommending model A. And as mentioned here, that we would look at hiring an interim head of school to begin next summer. Sam O'Brien also has indicated that he cannot continue in this role after June 2021. So this also should work. We would use Sam as a part-time consultant as needed, and then begin next fall identifying the search parameters and begin that essentially actually begin in the summer really with the design process of a permanent head of school search, so that we then have about 9 months to continue, and hopefully by a year from next summer we have a permanent head of school, we have an offer out, and we're ready to welcome in a new permanent head of school. I'm going to check for a moment here. Lindsay's sending a note. We think we found the solution. Click the ellipse on the bottom right side of the participants window. Yep. There it is. You can all start your videos now. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Lindsay. Only looked at that 70,000 times and managed to miss it every single time. So that's humbling. I use Zoom 12 hours a day. Say la vie. So the executive committee, we do recommend this model. We recommend looking at obtaining an interim head of school while beginning to design the search and the vision, frankly, for a permanent head of school, and take our time to do that as correctly as we can, all things considered. What that means, however, is we have multiple workflows that need to begin with this model. We need to identify strategy for communications and who's going to do what. We need to begin identifying that process of how and where do we search for an interim head of school, making sure it's a transparent process. The decision making is understood. How would that person be selected? Also, establishing job descriptions for both. What does an interim head of school look like versus a permanent head of school? They're not the same job. One is, it's like being at a temp agency. Again, no offense to someone at interim head of school, that's an analogy. You know you're not there for the long term. So that can be a different role. That also gives us the opportunity to align on that vision of a permanent head of school and those job descriptions, and look at the current state of Great River and what do we also need to evolve and mentor and grow and develop, so that we can step into that vision we would have for that new permanent head of school and the program managers and how they would all work with each other. That's what we're particularly interested from this group is how does that feel to all of you? What does that mean when you hear that? What does that look like? Where are your concerns? And of course, how would you like to help with this? Because we're going to need a lot more people than the three of us on the executive committee. We need everyone in the Great River community. We need feedback, we need participation, we need the passion for this school. And you know, as with almost anything in any world anyone's been involved with, we tend to have a core group of people who do a lot of the volunteering, especially certain parent groups. We obviously have a teacher majority board. So we've got teachers who are already committing many hours per month on the board. So we will need, however, more participation and chances to get your input and your voices heard in these channels, such as job descriptions and what should we be striving for, and what do we need an interim head of school? What's been working? What should change in a permanent head of school? Your feedback is so important in this process, and especially right now, for this particular session, we would love to hear, what do you think about this Model A, right? And what do you think, if you were around last year, any feedback or perspective on how that went or how you felt about that process? And again, feel free to just jump up and volunteer to take on anything as well. We will accept that at this time as well. We will also put a survey in the chat when this wraps up. Oh, I think Lindsay put it in the comments as well. A quick Google exit survey, so important. So you don't feel like you have, if you don't want to speak up, you don't have to right now. But that is really what we're hoping to hear from you in particular, is this idea of this model with an interim head of school. You know, how does that make you feel? What does that, what comes up for you? What should we take away as it? And we will go ahead, and I'm going to just run a Google Sheets here and keep some notes in terms of questions. And I think at this point, you could just feel free to, we have few enough people, just feel free to unmute and share, and we will all learn not to talk over each other. It'll be great. Oh, hi, Katie. I see Katie now too. Hi, Katie. So the floor is yours. You're all panelists. You can unmute at will.
Hi, everybody. This is Jennifer Nelson. Jenny, thank you.
Hello.
Could you clarify a little bit about how Wendy's position as the managing director would play into this model, and how that would be different than her acting like as an interim head of school, or where that would fit in this model?
That's a great question. And Lindsay, Mike, Katie, please keep me honest on this. My understanding would be with Model A that role, am I getting this right, Lindsay? If we do that, would be replaced by an interim head of school. Because right now, that managing director is to help be the physical Sam while he is in northern Minnesota. I see Lindsay nodding. I'm getting that right?
To clarify, we're currently in pandemic operation. And
Yes, we're in model B.
operation is a head of school of Sam and an on-site manager. We anticipate by June 2021 being able to transition to not pandemic 2020 to 2021 model, which would just be
Thank you.
a head of school.
If we make that decision, which again, we have not made the decision, we are making a recommendation as the committee, but we have not yet given that to the board and put it to vote. So nothing has actually been officially decided today. We're in the feedback session, feedback gathering.
So is this an okay time for me to give feedback? Because I have a few bullets I'd like to go through.
Absolutely.
Okay. One, when I read this presentation and the recommendation, it felt to me like the board was kind of like kicking the can down the road for the decision. It doesn't feel like to me that there's any guarantees that we're going to be in a better place to make a long-term permanent hiring next fall. I also feel like if we have the time to hire an interim person, then it seems like we have the time to hire a permanent person. So if we can come up with the list of qualities that an interim candidate should have, then we can come up with a list of qualities that a permanent candidate should have. If we can hold interviews and find all of those things for an interim candidate, I don't see the difference for finding it for a permanent. I haven't really heard from your description the benefits for going with this interim position. I really only heard the reasons why we can't do the other ones, not why this is the best way to go forward, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I read through the presentation, there was some bullet points about why we're not really in a position to hire someone in a pandemic, about kind of like the quality of candidates. And I don't really know what data or evidence you have to back up those claims. So
So just to interject quick, that was a comment by an executive recruiter who was, it was not meant toward anyone who applied last year. It was more of a general caution as a recruiter, what she was saying, just be super clear. Yep. Yeah. And that was just candid notes.
When I read through that, I felt like that wasn't something that we had any data or evidence to say that our hiring time right now is negative compared to the past. I guess the last two things is that I have just kind of watched from the outside that it feels like to hire for the head of school position at this point in time, it feels like we're hiring for two jobs in a traditional district. It feels like we're hiring for a superintendent with the long-term vision of the school, and then kind of a principal who does more of the day-to-day management and the kind of behavior, discipline things that a principal does. And I don't know what kind of consideration, that would have in our long-term envisioning of the job description. And then I want to acknowledge here that it took us about a half an hour and half of the time to get to a point where people could give feedback. So in a listening session, that didn't feel like the best use of our time. But those are the things that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and we definitely would welcome any feedback on what we shouldn't say at the beginning to set the stage for the listening session. So if anyone feels like we don't need to cover this, we'll take it out for next time as well. Okay, I want to make sure I got part of that. At the end, were you saying that in the current model, it feels like we're talking about two different positions. One's more strategic long-term and one is more everyday. Is that right?
Yeah, the everyday management of the school. But I want to be clear. Sometimes I've found in the management of the school that sometimes that person gets divided between a more focus in elementary or adolescent. And if we're looking at a day-to-day management, that they would be managing the whole 1st through 12 school from that perspective.
Thank you. So part of what I hear is the importance of the job descriptions becomes more and more clear. The role clarity, and again, that idea of if some of that needs to evolve and be more at, and again, I'm not saying this has been decided because this is not what the board decides, but if that is something that program managers would be, for instance, people think they should be more in charge of their programs, that requires an evolution, I think, in the way it's been. I think, candidly, I think there's been a general consensus that no one thinks the head of school should be Sam 2.0. The role is too much for one person. It's gotten too spread out, too diluted. And part of that is, so what does that mean though? If it's not how Sam did it, well, okay, but then what is it? And that's what we're really lacking right now, which I also think is part of the reason, we're probably not supposed to reply, but I'm going to anyway, because it saves a response later. Part of the reason why this idea of looking at an interim to get a little more stability and get the time to figure out that huge black box of, well, what is a permanent role supposed to be then? And do we really have enough time in the next few months to get all of that and conduct a thorough search for a permanent head of school? And that's one of our key concerns as the executive committee. This was definitely an abridged set of slides, but yeah, happy to provide any more context we can about the level of thought that we have done it at this point. And Nat, go ahead. I see your comment there.
All right. So for those that don't know, I'm newer to Great River School, 6 weeks. I don't know. something like
Welcome.
that. So I will say this, the comment, without the context of the recruiter stating about the quality of candidate, that comment was kind of a slap in the face to those of us who are newer, because it's saying, you know, candidates this year are just subpar. That said, I have worked with multiple executive recruiters in some, on my personal level, pre-pandemic, I was even looking. I have not heard that from a single one of them. I actually know quite a few CFOs, CEOs. We're talking large positions that they have successfully hired. I will say it's a little bit sketchier, without a doubt, but I do know that there has been a substantial amount. And I'm just curious if that was just one executive recruiter's position, or if it was kind of working with multiples, or where that's coming from. I also do want to say that I hear a lot at school in my, 6 wonderful weeks of wisdom about providing stability for students, and the idea of having that interim director and how much that's going to change things. And I think about enrollment, the lack of stability where people right now need stability.
Great points. Thank you. And again, that's another part of that question of, should the head of school be at the same level of student involvement as Sam has been, or is that really more appropriate for the program managers? The other point I do want to presence, and again, this is no shade on anyone from last year, but there was a group that was reviewing, and the decision was made from the recommendation of that group that of the candidates they'd had a chance to review, not to offer an interim head of school role at that time, to stop the search completely and restart. So again, we did have a search partly done, and we did not get a sufficient slate of people to make a decision and go ahead and just bring in a new head of school. So we did feel we needed to restart it, revamp it, and we have not yet engaged with an actual recruiter who can consult. We've had some phone calls with a parent volunteer who is very knowledgeable, but we have yet to actually retain help on that, and that is part of what we believe would be very important to, and someone who is a school recruiter, not necessarily a corporate recruiter, because they are, and which she has acknowledged, they're different candidates, different experience. So thank you for that feedback.
That's another question too, is not to say interviewing a recruiter, but is that a process that they're actually interviewing recruiters and comparing your options on a recruiter? I know on a personal level, I talked to a lot of recruiters, but some of them were just someone that was not able to see what I was looking for and what I wanted. They were more concerned with putting me in a new job and getting their check out of the deal.
Well, the good news is we haven't started any of it yet. And anyone who wants to help us vet a recruiter we should use, we would absolutely welcome your feedback on that, because we are not in that mode yet where we've engaged on anything as much as talking about what we think. And Johan, I see your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo a lot of what Abby said, and particularly, let's see, it's 4 or 5 years ago now. I know we had 2 heads of school, that was Sam O'Brien and Katie Ebis. And I remember just being kind of confused when Katie quit, and there was just Sam became the head of school. And I do really think having that be two different roles would be beneficial, because Sam, even before, and I don't want to put any shade on Sam, but even before
He gets it. Don't worry.
even before we have this arrangement where he's up north, or even before COVID, any of that, he's notoriously hard to communicate because I know he is busy. I helped him move up there. He is constantly on the phone dealing with Great River stuff, but just having someone, and that's where having Wendy Fisher around, she's someone who, like, I can ask question and I get a response very quickly, and it's very reassuring and creates a lot of stability. So I do really think that we need to go through and really nail down what the role of the head of school is, or if we have two heads of school, whatever we want to call it. But getting in exactly what their job is going to be really important.
I'm hearing it's really important we get those roles and responsibilities well defined.
Yes.
For everyone. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, Jennifer. Oh, and I'm sorry. Oh, Johan. Okay, that's your hand too. Jennifer. Yes. Nelson, not me.
Yeah, I think my question might be kind of like this concept of transfer of institutional knowledge. So Sam's been here for a really long time. He has a lot of expertise in so many different areas. And so I guess I'm wondering, like, how do we have an idea of how long he is willing to continue to act as consultant? And I'm just wondering, like, how the two models, you know, like going directly from having Sam be able to be the person that transfers over to a permanent head of school versus transferring knowledge to an interim and then an interim transferring to a head of school. Like, what might potentially get lost in that process is something to consider, but it seems like that is balanced with having maybe potentially more time to establish what we ultimately want. So it's kind of like this question of short-term gain versus like long-term gain, and I'm kind of stuck, like, which is more beneficial
or lower risk. All right, thank you. I've been pointed out that I need to quit talking and let everybody else. So I'm gonna, I just say thank you.
I will also mention, this goes along with being in a very tiny committee, trying to do a really big thing, that a mistake was made on the calendar that said we were only going to be here until 4:45, or in a different place it was posted at 5:15. And Jenny and I have committed to being on this Zoom until 5:45 to ensure all feedback is heard. And that was our original intent. So I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that too. But we totally understand when you have to go your separate ways. Just please complete that exit survey for us.
And I do see Adam has the hand up.
Hi all. So a couple observations. I started teaching in 2016, kind of at the beginning of the school expansion. And at that part, Sam's job felt very, I mean, he was already overwhelmed with the amount of work, but that job has only expanded. And Sam is still, this is from my own experience working in upper adolescent and ninth grade, is that he has still approached that job as if he was a teacher, or as if he was still the person who could do all those things, which I think is very particular to Sam and his personality. And this is me speaking from my perspective. So to hire anybody and expect them to be at that level of personal commitment and it is untenable. I think that is not realistic in terms of an expectation for a candidate. That being said, in conversations with other teachers who work at other schools, thinking particularly about really big districts, there is oftentimes kind of a cultural thing where people are frustrated by administration not understanding teachers' experience or students' experience. And so thinking about, as you craft the role, thinking of some way to have that job of head of school have also some kind of touch point for student and teacher experience. maybe they teach a class once a quarter.
Hmm.
Maybe there's something written into the job description where they have to observe a certain amount of things, just so that there is some kind of we can kind of hold that spirit of a head of school who is really involved without expecting somebody to be at the same level. That is, kudos to Sam for everything that he's done for our school, but it is unrealistic for someone in that position, and also not stable if we have a person who is trying to do everything but doesn't do the stuff that is really their job, which is to keep the financial stability and the other organizational stability of the school. Going back to Johan's point about Katie Ibis's role versus Sam's role, and that I think the philosophy of that was sort of a curriculum head versus sort of an organizational head. It seems like right now the program managers are the housing units of curriculum design and curriculum expectations for teachers. And that feels like we're moving in that direction as a school, and it feels okay for me personally in my role as a 9th grade teacher. And that seems like that doesn't need to be an entire executive role that is added. But that being said, then there are other parts that are decided by the head of school that do impact curriculum that we should sort of maybe tease out and realize either through pay or through direct job description, that like program managers are now essentially the curriculum heads. And my cat is just being totally ridiculous.
So cute.
So just making that, on paper and official, so that if we do have people who switch curriculum roles, that is also an expectation, that becomes sort of the hub of how people are understanding like where curriculum decisions are being made.
Where they are. Yeah. Thank you very much. Totally agree. And I think that's part of that whole little box that says job description will probably have to explode down the line. Like, well, if this is going to be this, well, what does it mean for this, this, this? And they're all going to have some fresh takes. Totally agree. Because that and Sam would agree with a lot of what you've said, especially the untenable part. I think he's used that phrase. So
yeah.
No.
One other question: if somebody is hired as an interim director, would they still be able to apply for the permanent director position?
Yes.
So theoretically, we hire an interim director and they're great. They could still be hired on.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. We did talk about that. No reason to exclude. There are some people who we've done some research on. There are people whose whole gig is being interim. Right? And it's a very different mindset. But we are not by any means going to exclude, you cannot even think about joining the school permanently. That would not be our expectation. Nat. Oh, Mike, I'm sorry. Then Mike. Nat, then Mike.
Are we envisioning or hoping for, I'm really sorry, the dogs are dueling next to me. Are we envisioning or hoping for an interim director who's going to step into the role? And I mean, I'm just trying to picture this. Ian, at what point in time after the interim director is hired, would they start the real hiring process for the real new head of school?
For permanent?
Yes.
So I think we are working to keep expectations very open. So not have an expectation that this person absolutely could not or would not be permanent head of school, and also not an expectation that they will slide right into permanent head of school either. They will be different searches. The goal expectation is that I would say mid-summer next year, that the design process of, okay, how are we going to kick off this permanent head of school search begins. So that takes about 3 months. And then the recruiting begins in the fall, giving about 3 months to find candidates, 3 months then to interview, leaving the end of the year kind of clear because everyone's fried. And then 3 months to finalize by the end of next school year. Mike.
I just have something to say in regards to the executive director. I would consider it executive director position here. I'm actually on another board for another school as well too. And on that board, I'd say I've been on there for about four or 5 years or so. We've actually been through about 2 executive directors. So let me give you a little bit of background information here. so the first executive director, everything actually kind of went well. Uh, you know, this is something we actually have to take into consideration when we actually find an executive director, whether if this individual is actually going to fit into the culture and the fabric of the school. And if they don't fit well, you know, because buttons are going to be pushed here, there could be legal grievances here. And one thing I actually wanted to do is if we actually were to find somebody, I want to make sure that we actually take our time and find the right candidate that would actually fit not only with the students, the parents, the teachers, and the culture, and holding of what parents actually would expect of a Montessori school. Um, the second executive director, we actually came through on board. We just recently just hired this individual, and this person, you know, paper looks great. Interview went well. Um, but as of right now, we've encountered a lot of challenges, and we're about, you know, they just started the school year here. So as a result of that, we've actually had a lot of some legal grievances, in addition with losing students as well too. That fact that the executive director doesn't connect well with the parents. So we've actually lost, I'd say about 34 to 35 students. So which is actually roughly about equivalent to about a class size as well, which decreases our budget as well. So I think that's something that we actually have to be very considerate in, making sure that we actually do pick the right person that does fit within the Montessori teaching style, that does understand the student experience, the key experiences, and understand why parents actually want to bring their school to Great Rivers.
Thank you, Mike. Does anyone wish to share who hasn't had a chance yet? I know there's some who have not, but you're not obligated. Just want to make sure. There's another tail. I love all the animals. It's the best part about Zoom.
I guess
Debbie.
something that you kind of said in the agenda, which I'm still not sure how is going to be addressed, is that how the feedback we're giving right now will be taken and when we know like how it was used.
Mhm.
So like what would be really disappointing to me is to provide feedback in this session right now and then hear the board make a decision and not understand how it related to the feedback given in this session.
It's a great point. Right now I'm actually running a listening session notes, but it is in our public folder, right where you could find all the minutes, the folders for all of our board meetings. And there is a column for response. In addition, and I don't expect everyone to go find that. What we're doing right now is we're checking in with the different stakeholders. We're also checking in with the folks who reviewed and were in the process last year. We do have, and you're all invited to it, Wednesday at 4 p.m. We have an executive committee meeting where we'll be synthesizing and talking about what we've learned from all these different areas of feedback, so that as a board, next Tuesday, the 24th, if we're going to make a recommendation, we've essentially incorporated all of that. I would say, and we're happy to do so, you know, as soon as we do have responses to each of these, or for instance, if we say, okay, we decided to go with this and we acknowledge that this is a concern and here's how we believe we're going to be able to address it, that will be part of that whole communications channel. That's so important, right? So a decision will be made one way or the other. And we'll want to be able to then acknowledge, we understand there's concerns with this. Here's where we're working to, and why we believe this is the right path for this school. And I encourage you, if it feels like it still didn't get answered, just ask. Absolutely. If it's getting overlooked or not answered to anyone's satisfaction, you can do executive@greatriverschool.org. It'll go to all of us on the committee, and we want to get things answered. We don't want to feel like you're, you know, talking into the void, right? We want to feel like there is feedback and that you can see that your concerns were reviewed, acknowledged, whatever the decision is, that no one was blown off. But that we took things into account and then we chose to do X, Y, Z. But do let us know if we can do better at that, or we're not getting it. Let us know, and we'll do what we can. And we'll have another session if you want. talk about it. How did we get here? We're happy to do that too. Okay.
Abby, just a quick question for you. What are you actually expecting in a executive director? I mean, what would you like for them to look like, or you know,
Like, are you saying head of school when you say executive
yeah,
director?
or
We're talking
yeah,
head
yeah,
of school. Okay.
head of school. Sorry. Yeah. What are you looking for in regards to a head of school, Abby?
Well, I'm one person who like represents a very narrow needs of the school, so I'm not going to speak to like what I specifically as one guide would need. I think I've raised, some concerns in the decision-making process, and that's what I'm most concerned about.
Okay. Any follow-on questions, Mike?
Let's see here. Now, regards to the last search here, it actually stopped. What, why did we stop, or why didn't we actually move forward with those candidates? What was the reason why?
I would say come to the executive meeting on Wednesday, because I think that'll be part of what we're learning from that group.
Okay.
Or literally, Lindsay and I have emailed, each of us emailed half of the folks to get their insight and lessons learned from it. And we're still, I don't know about Lindsay, but I'm still getting a few things and consolidating. And again, anyone's welcome. 4 p.m. Super fun. More Zoom.
Are you just hoping for more dogs on that Zoom and cats?
My dog is usually right here snoring, but she's too big to come on my lap. So if she did, I would tip right over. No one wants to see, trust me.
So let me ask this question, and please tell me if the tug of war occurring in the background is annoying.
Really hear it. Don't worry about it.
So how, when looking for this person or persons, depending on which direction, whether we do an interim or permanent, how do you ensure that person is well-versed in the grades 1 through 12? So you don't see, I mean, from my perspective in the admin office, I do see a ton of focus towards the elementary and less towards the adolescent. Obviously, I'm not seeing everything. I very rarely see Sam, actually once for an hour. So just how do you make sure that you've got someone that can adequately cover all of those bases, but also flip, because they do have two very different needs. Your elementary students have totally different needs than your adolescent students. How do you make sure you found someone that can cover all of those bases and fluidly flip from one to the other?
It's a great question. Two things. One is, and before I forget, Nat, what's your last name?
Sorry, Luterman.
L-U?
Lutterman.
I would have given you a D, thank you. I would say, and this is just speaking as what I've heard, again, I just really want to remind you, the executive committee is not in the business of making this decision, but based on what we've heard, I posit that that's impossible for the head of school to be able to think of all of that. And that's all the more reason why we've talked about really bringing into light this leadership model that was started with the program managers, and the idea of, I mean, for lack of, again, making up terms here, but lower, middle, upper schools almost, right? And so that let them be the focus on that, on the pedagogy, on the curriculum, on those students. And the head of school has things like authorizers and funders and the law and the Department of Education and managing the managers. There's a whole set of work that needs to be done at that level as well. That's all, again, part of that whole job description. And we would love someone with your passion to be helping in writing perhaps those job descriptions. And what should that look like in a perfect world? How do you do that? I don't think one person can have that be present to all of that, frankly. I mean, maybe we'll find someone who can, but I think you get someone who's very diluted trying to cover everything when you have managers who are specializing in those buckets of ages that perhaps would be better suited to be more empowered to do that. So my thought. That's kind of what we're hearing, but again, that's going to be part of the process too, is figuring that out. And we're so, like I said, we're so early. We don't have that job description yet of how that would change and what that would look like. We're phase 0. Yeah. So we can kind of get some consensus on that together too, and figure out how do we serve the Great River community best with this role and the other roles at the school.
So that job description thing brought up a whole nother train of thought, and
Mhm.
forgive me if some of these have already been covered or not. Has the idea of, I mean, it was spoken about previously, job description was put out, no qualified candidate was found. Has the idea of going back and saying, okay, maybe we can't find someone who has the right qualifications to fit the job description. Do we need to make modifications to that job description and what we're looking for?
I got it,
I
Lindsay.
feel like that's going to end up
I see you
basically
unmuting.
starting the clock, going back that like 6 months.
Right. So I would say 2 things. One, we absolutely have to rewrite the job descriptions because that was part of what the committee found, was that process had felt pretty rushed. It wasn't done robustly enough. And we weren't envisioning yet who did we want for the role. We were just like, we need someone for the role. It's a very different attitude, right? Like create the place and look for the person who fits it versus we need someone. It's not to say there were no qualified candidates. That is not fair or accurate. But the committee did not feel comfortable giving an offer to the candidates we had, not because anyone wasn't qualified, but because I think the biggest part was there was too much ambiguity in the expectations of the role, frankly, to be like, we're not entirely sure. And I'm sorry if I said it clumsily at the beginning. I'm sure I did. I get nervous. You guys are intimidating. So it's not to say, oh, everyone sucked last year. It's not what we're saying at all, even slightly. It's we didn't know what we wanted or needed yet. So how on earth can we possibly hire for a role that we're not even sure what it should do? And that's part of that. We need to back up and rewrite what we're looking for. So then when the person is here, we know they fit into the role we need versus adapting the role for a person we have. So we have a chance it will take longer, but we have a chance to do that. And again, apologies if I said that wrong earlier. I have no doubt I did.
It may not have been how you said it wrong. We all know that even within context, I mean, when you're speaking about it, it could have been something that I read in the slide. And I mean, words without.
We have learned we will always proof the slides from now.
Well, but
that won't happen again.
Emotions and things like that.
Totally.
You can ask Charlie about me nitpicking the website. I was like, hey, you missed an R and a word. He's like, oops, it's been that way long. Like, it's easy enough. You stare at it long enough, it happens.
Yeah. And again, the feedback is completely, we need to know, hey, that, this copy paste of someone's note was offensive to everyone who's here. We want to know that. That is good to know. So yeah, don't be shy about letting us know that stuff so we can do better too. Oh, hello. My dog did come in to say hi.
I have one question. So I know that we're still, like you said, we're at phase 0. Would a search for an interim director follow the same path that was occurring for, the search for the previous director before the pandemic, or would it take a different form in terms of, from what I know, it was like about 3 months. There was a group that was collecting information that was then, that was like doing that job. Would that still be the case, that we would have a group of people who are staff members from school, or would the process look different because they were interim who was being hired versus a permanent staff? Maybe I'll say, is that the job
I get the question.
Yeah. Does the process look different for interim versus a permanent position?
So I think it's part of the question we are having too, which is, as a board, we are not under the expectation that we're going to step out and appoint someone. Like, the expectation is there will be a search and there will be candidates, whether it's an interim or a permanent role or both. But past that, Lindsay, would you say we have any more? I mean, I do think we will need people to help with it, but we also need that group to fundamentally be set up for success better than they were last year as well, whether it's the interim group or a permanent group for the search. Did I get that right, Lindsay? It was like word spaghetti there.
My easy answer is we don't know, because our focus as an executive committee has been proposing Model A, or creating Model A in a description for the board consideration. I will also mention that I'm house sitting for my parents. So those of you commenting on the kitchen,
It's nice. It's very nice kitchen. Yeah, so that's the best answer. We don't know yet because we are not the ones designing it, I would say. Nor do we want to be, I would like to add. Lindsay and I have no desire to be in charge of that at all. Mike's asking, last time with our search, did we involve our authorizer to help? I don't remember. Again, I would check when we've accumulated everything we learned from last year to see if that's part of what we learned. It was a different group, so I don't remember off the top of my head. There certainly will likely be involved in interviewing candidates at some point because we need them to feel comfortable. But I don't know search wise. Good question, Mike. Anyone else, feel free to unmute and ask because I'm looking at my other screen typing here for a second.
The panels that actually were involved with the search last time, are they here as well today?
I don't think any of the folks that helped last year are on this call. No.
Just would like to see like if they were, maybe we can actually get some pointers or feedback or what actually happened, what went right, what went wrong.
Again,
That's exactly what Lindsay and I are doing. That's what we'll be discussing on Wednesday. Yeah.
I wasn't on the board last year, but part of my understanding and kind of bringing myself back up to speed to rejoin the board this year was that COVID hit and
yeah,
nobody knew. I mean, if you think back to February, March, how uncertain everything was, the importance of stability, the importance of the institutional knowledge that Sam has, I think also probably played a large role in just pushing the pause button on the search process. So that's part of my, secondhand recollection from reading last year's board minutes. We didn't know how to Zoom back in March and April the way we can Zoom now. So interviewing was daunting, I'm sure.
Is it all right if I throw something else out without, I hope I'm not talking over anyone.
Go for it.
So not that Sam is not approachable. Sam is stupidly approachable. It's just catching Sam. Is that one of the goals, is to restructure enough to make that person more available? Or whether that be hiring whoever steps into that role, a specific assistant, to be able to help field emails, contact, track them down, for lack of a better way of wording it.
Again, I would say kind of sky's the limit right now in terms of expectation because we haven't started it. But want to acknowledge for you, Nat, in particular, until last spring, he didn't live 300 miles away. So that makes it much harder as well. So I think we don't want to keep a model of the head of school who literally lives and works remotely. And even Sam, like I said, he said, I can't do this past June. Like he has to be able to move on. So without committing too hardcore, I would say, yes, the goal would be this person's a bit more available and accessible than what you've experienced to date.
I've actually had zero issues catching Sam.
Because he's stupidly accessible. All right.
I mean, he's always been great about answering.
He's very engaged. Absolutely. Sorry, I have two teenage boys just walked in and are very amped up. Sorry, Mom. Thanks, honey. Go. Go. We need pizza. I will get pizza later. Thank you.
Pizza. I'll be over soon.
Pizza time. Monday pizza night. Anyway, no, that's great. And like I said, we appreciate your questions. This is a great time to ask them. So
I'm just trying to
oh, yes.
Sorry. I was just trying to understand the whole role of Sam of actually being head of school. So Sam's actually in charge, and then you actually have like kind of an office administration staff that actually handle all the finance and everything. And then you actually have your educational, director actually in charge of all the education, curriculum, and pedagogy. Is that correct? And then that's what we're looking for, Sam? Or do you want Sam is actually kind of the well-rounded guy or guy or gal to be able to actually hop from role to role. I'm just wondering, in
Mhm.
regards to finding a new head of director or a new head of school, how that would actually look or what people's expectations are.
So in this pandemic model, what Sam did, knowing he was so far away, was he hired Wendy to be the on-site director, to try to help be that person who is there for the day-to-day, right? Keeping him the face and name for the authorizer, the bondholders, the Department of Education, the folks who decide whether or not we can stay open, basically. Obviously, he's doing the family forums. He's still that face to the community. That is model B, which we have said we do not recommend we keep doing it, nor do we believe it's sustainable. It's confusing. It creates an additional layer. It's what we needed to do. And I think it's worked very, very well. I think Wendy's been great from what I can tell. But that model is not sustainable for the school. It's confusing for a lot of people. Lindsay, would you add anything?
No.
Okay.
Can I pop in and ask? So hiring a new Sam, replacement Sam, whatever this person may be, how does that impact Wendy? I mean, was the plan to hire Wendy as an interim type person, or was she hired long term?
Probably more a question for Sam because she's his employee. So again, I'm speaking with that secondhand knowledge, but my understanding is he specifically hired her to be this interim managing director for this transition time.
I
It's
will
not
mention
meant to be a permanent position. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
the plan that the board approved from the board's perspective is we approved pandemic operation for 1 year.
Yeah.
And therefore on-site manager is part of pandemic operation. So our understanding from the board is we were in pandemic operations specifically for the 2020 to 2021 school year.
I appreciate the perspective. Thank you.
Johan, did you see the note from Lindsay about she was trying to find the old, I think it was a description, right? But we're not finding it, so we'll do what we can to find it. I'll put a note here.
Now, yes.
Was it the old job description? Is that what you're looking for, Lindsay?
The job description that was posted for the head of
Thank you.
school, the first search.
Thank you. I'm just making stuff a note here.
And question for Lindsay, regards to Wendy's position, is it just only for this COVID-19 that after 2021 that she's gonna be phased out or removed out of the budget, or is she going to stay and continue on?
I believe that is currently a question for Sam because it is his position that he created. Yeah, as part of one of his employees.
Don't take this explicitly as the truth, but I have actually, this was late spring when I asked Sam what's going on, and he explained Wendy's role, and it did sound like it was just during pandemic times. But I, again, do not take that as the truth. Ask him yourself.
Again, I can say, as the board, that was our expectation last spring. It was a bridge during this pandemic operations. If we were recommending model B and saying, okay, next year we're going to continue pandemic operations, then what we saw in that would be Sam would be transferring more responsibilities to that role currently occupied by Wendy. Melanie, I just wanted to check in. Did you want to add any comments or type in chat or go off mute or anything? Just make sure you have a chance.
Hi, I'm just communicating with a whole bunch of upper adolescent students while we're talking.
Oh.
I'm listening. So yeah, sorry I haven't had my video on, but multitasking, I think you'd get the focused typing face. I appreciate the conversation, and I think people have echoed many of my thoughts, and mostly I just wanted to listen actually to understand.
That's perfect.
And kind of hear what our community is thinking. I appreciate you making time to take feedback.
Absolutely. All right, sorry, now I'm getting texts. Okay. Any other comments? All right. Well, Johan, Nat, sorry, Nat, Melanie, we are at your disposal for approximately 20 26 minutes, 27 minutes if you'd like. We can see what you're testing out for virtual coffee house, whatever you want.
I think I'll sign out if the conversation.
What?
I am definitely not singing. I like singing, but I'm way too shy.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie.
Bye.
Yeah. Someone mentioned that. Do you think when we go back to real life, we'll all wave as we leave the rooms? Bye, guys. Leave a conference room.
Wait, we're going back to real life?
I don't know when. That's a someday.
I'm guessing it's gonna be 6 feet apart, right, Jenny?
That's true. That's true. Little finger touches.
Early pandemic, I carried a pool noodle, and if people got too close to me, I whapped them with it.
Nice. Now you're just a trailblazer. Oh, look at that pupper. Hey, honey.
He's
Got a
annoying. You
haircut.
want him?
No, mine's doing the same thing. She's super annoying. But I'll keep my annoying one. Well, Johan, Nat, what you got?
I guess nothing right now. I feel like I had more thoughts, but I should write them down in the future. But honestly, I do think like they were covered through what I said and also what other people said.
I'm glad to hear it. We appreciate your feedback and your questions. And we will find that old description. Make sure we follow up on that.
Don't forget that exit survey too.
Yes.
I put it in the chat again, so it's easy.
And Jenny and Lindsay, would you guys be interested if I can go and try to find the job descriptions that we actually use for our head of school at our other school as well too?
I think
well
that'll come into play when a search committee is put together, because I don't think that will actually be the role of the executive.
Yeah,
committee.
good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, good point. I mean, if you want to find it and then hold it, that'd be great. 'Cause I think they'd benefit from that. Yeah. We are trying really hard not to take that on and give any impression that we're going to. So, yeah. But I think there's been some good resources shared. And I think the more the better, frankly.
And actually, a question that came up is I've never interviewed. Okay. What is the committee, the search committee look like? Who's it made up of? Who is for this position? What kind of people do you envision being on it?
I don't think we've gotten that far because we haven't decided what we're going to do officially. But I do believe, one thing Lindsay suggested, I think is such a good idea, is next Tuesday, assuming we do make a decision and vote and clear it, then we want to immediately follow up with communication out to the Great River community as a whole, saying there's a plan now. And I think part of that, I was making notes for myself about, is it needs to include what are next steps, who do we need, what do we need, what are the roles, like really kind of big, and we need all of you, here's the kind of stuff we need. And I do think part of that will be we'll learn from the folks last year too and their recommendations of who should be part of that. There's also a difference between the search committee, which is kind of the herding cats of getting the word out, and like the interview committee, right? And they're not necessarily the same people. So also making that clear of what those different roles and responsibilities are, because someone might really want to be part of interviewing and evaluating candidates, but maybe not coordinating how do we get the word out or that kind of thing. But you can feel free to volunteer for all of them. We will take you.
Thank you.
Don't hold back.
That brings up another question of mine. Apparently, Johan, we're just going to tag off each other's thoughts. So don't know, I'm going to assume. I know I've been on a board where you start getting enough people or a committee, and it is literally herding cats because it's a hung jury. There's too many people. Everybody's always fighting. Somebody's mad. Has a cap. Stop squeaking. Has a cap been set on, is there a target? Is there a plan for who we're looking for these committees? How many people on them? Those types of things.
I will say we are a 2-person committee that has been super focused on making sure there is a coherent model for what we're going to do for a head of school transition. And we have done nothing but prepare that model.
Yep.
So that's where we are honestly, but we know like we've come all of these questions about what's next, how do we form the committee, how do we communicate, all of those are things that we've mentioned throughout building this, but we have been really narrow vision in making sure that something's proposed to the board and that there's a communication plan that involves all stakeholders on that model.
Who can then go to the next level of details you're talking about. So we're planning to plan at this point. Lindsay, Mike's saying that the survey says it's not accessible. They need
I
permission.
think it's only for right now.
the
I'm working
Great
on
River
it.
emails.
I think it's only for Great River emails. And Mike, I would also mention you're a member of the executive board. So I wasn't designing it for members of the executive board, but I have change of permission.
Okay.
So
Also, if you log in with your Great River email, it'd probably work.
I don't have a Great River email.
You do actually.
I do. Okay. I haven't
Yes.
been given the password or get in. Would I reach out to you, or who would I reach out to?
Stacy.
Stacy. Okay. I'll probably email
Yeah.
Stacy then.
Perfect. Yep.
So
And
Lindsay,
another,
I do appreciate the clarification on we're only two people. I mean, two people with jobs, lives, all of that. We get that. I guess I didn't realize it was only two people, but I mean, you probably don't butt heads as much as a larger committee.
And Sam. I will mention that Sam
Yep.
has supported and kind of asking some clarifying questions, but also has really respected that this isn't his process.
Mhm.
So I think we're really appreciative as Sam as like kind of a communication consultant. Like,
Yeah.
have you thought about this stakeholder? Have you thought about this stakeholder? And that's been really helpful.
Because he wants us to succeed very much. He really wants it to succeed. Yeah.
And I guess that brings up stop squeaking. Another
Can't hear
question.
it. It's fine.
Another question I have then. So has it been considered in some of the steps of this process to bring in an external party that is not on one of these committees, something like that, to proofread communications? And I don't mean that negatively, but we've all done it. I mean, you stare at something so long, your eyes are crossed, and you're literally not going to see the most glaring mistake just because that's been your focus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are looking at that, especially this, when you look at the idea of human change management, right? How do we convey to a large group of people about a bunch of uncertainty and help them not feel like the wheels are falling off? There's a whole skill set to that. And there's actually a parent who is skilled at that, who has, indicated willingness to help kind of craft that. That's kind of that whole communication strategy flow of like, okay, what do we need to do? How do we make sure people know, A, nothing's happening too fast, but B, something will happen, but C, we're going to do it right, but D, we can't take forever. Like all of those nuances. Yeah. It's not just going to be us in Google PowerPoint trying to do it. Yeah.
and when the time comes for soliciting volunteers to be on these committees, boards, whatever, will there be like a mass communication sent out to the whole community saying, hey, we're looking for people to do this? I just don't want to be out of the loop.
Yep. So one way you can make sure that we know that you want to be involved is to answer the exit survey that's in the chat, but also in our mass communications out after the decision is made, which might be next week and it might not, depending on what the board decides.
Right.
We need to get volunteers so you can believe that there will be communication. So
flat out begging, groveling, pleading. Yeah. I troll the parent Facebook posts and beg people to join. Yeah. Well, and for any reason, you're like, I feel like I should have heard something by now. Please don't hesitate to reach out and ask us. We don't want to leave anyone out of the loop who would like to be part of it. Absolutely.
I feel like you should have left whatever question it was where you had to pick level 1, level 2, or level 3 as a multiple choice so people could just select all 3.
Nice. I'm all in. I'll do it all. Well, thank you. We really appreciate your time and the engagement and being willing to show up and ask questions. I appreciate it. It's how we learn what is important and what we need to make sure we're covering.
Jenny, thanks for hosting again.
Yes. Thanks
And
for running tech.
thank you for your patience as we figured out Zoom webinar.
Yep. We'll get there. A little smoother each time.
Our school board meeting next
Tuesday.
is public.
Sure is. 4:30. Gonna be great.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Jenny, do you feel like we need to connect on anything right now?
I don't think so. I'm trying to figure out how to stop recording. One sec. There it is.